Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the thoughts and reflections of someone named Tyler. We're going to try to uncover, his core values, passions, and potential.
We're essentially trying to piece together the puzzle of his inner world, right? He's given us these lists of his loves, hates, even those moments where he felt truly happy.
Yeah, he even did a five whys analysis, which is going to be really fascinating to unpack, I think. And, the idea here isn't just to understand Tyler, but to see what we can learn from his self-reflection and apply to our own lives.
Absolutely. Self-awareness is such a powerful tool. So why don't we start with the positives? Tyler's What I Love list is full of really interesting items. Travel, novel experiences, problem solving, even systems engineering.
It's interesting to me how he talks about losing track of time when he's engaged in these activities. It sounds like he's experiencing what's known as a flow state. That state of complete absorption where you're so engrossed in what you're doing that you lose all sense of time and self. It's a powerful feeling, and it's often associated with peak performance and creativity. Have you ever felt that, listener?
It's a wonderful feeling, and it often happens when we're doing something we're truly passionate about. And with Tyler, it seems like he really loves creating solutions, working with talented people, and seeing ideas come to life. He even mentions valuing doing what's right over what's simply profitable.
Yeah, that really stood out to me, too. It makes me wonder what drives that kind of passion. Thankfully, he did a five whys analysis to kind of get to the root of his motivation.
And his analysis reveals a deep-seated desire to empower high-performing individuals to change the world. He finds satisfaction in solving problems and creating value, and not just for himself, but to provide opportunities for others to do meaningful work.
You can really see that he believes in the power of people to make a difference. And he wants to create an environment where that potential can be realized.
Yeah.
It's about more than just a job for Tyler. It's about creating a space where people can contribute to something bigger than themselves.
He's not just going through the motions, he's driven by a higher purpose. But no deep dive would be complete without exploring the other side of the coin, right? What Tyler hates.
Right. And his what I hate list pulls no punches. Bureaucracy, processes that prioritize procedure over delivering actual results, and a lack of strong leadership are just a few things he despises.
He despises those things. He really does. He also uses the words anathema and lethargy, and it paints a very clear picture of his ideal work environment: dynamic, efficient, and focused on impact.
He has some strong words for non-performers,
Yeah.
especially those who are overpaid. He calls out what he sees as cowardice and lack of vision in certain individuals.
But these strong dislikes, though perhaps harshly worded, likely stem from his desire for efficiency and seeing tangible results, right? It aligns with his love for problem solving and his belief in empowering high performers.
It's like his loves and hates are two sides of the same coin, both driven by a passion for making a real impact. But let's shift gears for a moment and look at something a bit more uplifting. Tyler also provided a list of those moments when he felt truly happy.
And it's quite a diverse range of experiences: travel adventures, dancing, learning new ideas, mentoring others, even just brainstorming solutions with like-minded people over a few beers.
It sounds like he finds joy in experiences, connecting with others, and constantly expanding his knowledge and skills. He even mentioned spending time with his children and spouse.
This reminds me of the psychology of happiness. It suggests that happiness isn't about material possessions or fleeting pleasure, but about meaningful experiences, genuine connection, and a sense of personal growth.
Absolutely. And speaking of growth, Tyler mentions the hedgehog concept by Jim Collins, which is a framework for finding your sweet spot in life.
Yeah, it encourages us to think about what we're passionate about, what we can be the best at, and what actually allows us to make a living.
It's powerful when you can align those three elements: passion, skill, and economic viability. And Tyler seems to be very aware of this concept and how it applies to his own aspirations.
It seems like he's put a lot of thought into how to craft a life that aligns with his values and allows him to contribute something meaningful to the world. And his reflections are just full of these intriguing little anecdotes and random thoughts that give us even more insight into his thinking.
Well, like that Eagle leadership case study he mentions, he doesn't really provide much detail, which is kind of frustrating.
Yeah, it's like a little breadcrumb trail, isn't it?
Yeah.
It certainly makes you wonder what he sees in eagles and their behavior that he finds relevant to leadership. Maybe it's their sharp vision, their decisiveness, or their ability to soar above challenges.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
He also mentions this idea that the more value you bring to the world, the more resources you're given to deliver even more value.
That's interesting. It seems to suggest a belief in a meritocratic system where your contributions are recognized and rewarded, enabling you to make an even greater impact. But it also raises some questions about how we even define and measure value in the real world.
That's a much bigger conversation, and maybe a good place to wrap up part one of our deep dives into Tyler's mind. We've explored his loves, hates, values, and we're starting to see how those elements shape his worldview and aspirations.
Yeah, we've seen his desire to make a difference, his passion for problem solving, and his belief in human potential. And in part two, we're going to delve even deeper. We'll look at his thoughts on happiness, fulfillment, and the complexities of navigating a world that's constantly changing. Welcome back to our deep dive into the mind of Tyler.
In part one, we kind of explored his loves, hates, and values. But now I think it'd be fascinating to kind of dive into some specific examples from his notes,
Yeah.
to see how these concepts play out in real life. I'm particularly curious about that Eagle leadership case study he mentioned.
Yeah, he brings up this Eagle case study in leadership by someone named Anton Meyer. But frustratingly, he doesn't give us a lot of details.
It's such a tease. But even without specifics, it gets the imagination going, right? What is it about eagles that Tyler finds relevant to leadership?
Yeah.
Is it their sharp vision, their powerful presence, or their ability to, soar above the fray?
He also brings up this thought-provoking idea. He writes, "The more value you bring to the world, the more resources are given to you to deliver even more value."
It's almost like he's suggesting that the more we contribute, the more opportunities open up to us. Sort of a virtuous cycle where, our efforts are recognized and rewarded, which then allows us to make an even bigger impact.
It's a compelling idea, but it also kind of begs the question, how do we define value, right? Is it purely about economic impact? Or are there other forms of value that are just as important? Things like social impact, artistic expression, or even just making someone's day a little bit brighter.
It's something to think about for sure. Tyler also kind of dives into this whole complex relationship between happiness and fulfillment. He says happiness is transient, meaning it kind of comes and goes, while fulfillment is learning and applying the skills that make you and the world a better place.
So he's suggesting that true fulfillment goes beyond those kind of fleeting moments of happiness. It's about finding lasting satisfaction in using your skills to make a positive difference, whether that's in your own life or the lives of others.
He seems to be saying that chasing happiness might be a bit of a wild goose chase, while pursuing a life of meaning and purpose that's a more sustainable path to long-term satisfaction.
It's a perspective that resonates with a lot of research in psychology. Studies show that people who have a strong sense of purpose tend to be happier and healthier.
Tyler also really emphasizes mindset and perseverance. He shares a quote that really resonated with me. He says, "Success is going from failure to failure to failure to failure without losing the enthusiasm."
It's a good reminder that setbacks are inevitable, right, on any path to success. And it's our ability to bounce back from those setbacks, to keep moving forward, that really makes all the difference.
It's not about avoiding failure, it's about reframing it, seeing it as a necessary part of the learning process. Now, Tyler also talks about this idea of control and how it relates to our sense of safety and self-worth. He notes that everything comes back to feeling safe, and feeling safe means being in control. As such, everyone wants to be safe, and that's what they're looking for, and communities build safety.
It brings up some interesting questions. How much control do we actually have over our lives, and how can our desire for safety sometimes actually limit our growth?
He goes on to say that everything comes down to self-worth, connecting our sense of security to our belief in our own value. It's like our perception of ourselves plays a huge role in how we interact with the world.
It makes me think about the importance of cultivating a strong sense of self-worth, not based on external validation, but on this intrinsic belief in our inherent value that can be so powerful.
Absolutely. Now, Tyler also shares some really interesting insights about business and leadership. He talks about the challenges of making decisions as a leader, especially when you're relying on information from others, people who might be hesitant to offer truly honest feedback.
He talks about how important it is to create an environment where people feel safe to speak their minds, even if it means disagreeing with the leader, which, requires trust, open communication, and valuing those diverse perspectives.
He also talks about the importance of clear accountability after meetings, making sure that those decisions are translated into action. He's a big advocate for assigning responsibility, with a clear who, what, and when for every task.
It's about structure, isn't it? That structured approach to decision-making and making sure things actually get done.
He really criticizes that tendency to reward activity over results. He wants leaders to create a culture that prioritizes outcomes.
So it's about focusing on what's actually being accomplished, not just how busy everyone seems.
Exactly. He also warns against what he calls delegating up, where employees kind of push decisions up the chain of command instead of taking ownership themselves.
That can create a culture of a dependency, can't it? It hinders the growth of both the individual and the team as a whole.
It definitely ties back to his earlier points about empowering high performers and creating a workplace where people can thrive. Now, I thought Tyler's take on this whole winning now versus winning later dilemma was particularly insightful. How leaders need to balance short-term gains with long-term sustainability.
It's like a constant juggling act, isn't it? It takes real skill to make decisions that benefit the company both now and in the future.
And he also cautions against relying too heavily on just metrics to measure success. While data is important, it doesn't always tell the whole story.
Right. He's saying we need to consider the quantitative and the qualitative. Look beyond the numbers and take into account things like morale, customer satisfaction, and the overall impact on stakeholders.
It's a good reminder that leadership isn't about simple formulas. It's about making judgments, considering a wide range of factors. And speaking of nuance, I really loved how Tyler talked about this idea of radical freedom. He says, radical freedom, accepting limitations, is liberating, so that within that constraint you can be free.
I love that. It's like true freedom comes not from having endless choices, but from understanding our constraints, recognizing that we all operate within certain boundaries and that accepting those boundaries can free us up.
He connects into decision fatigue, saying your hesitation to choose just made this a disaster. Too many options can be paralyzing.
It's a good point. Sometimes less is more. Simplify your choices, focus on what matters, make a decision, and move forward.
I feel like Tyler's notes are just full of these little nuggets of wisdom. They offer a glimpse into how he sees the world.
Yeah. What stands out to you the most so far? What resonates?
I think his emphasis on purpose, making a meaningful contribution, it's inspiring.
I really appreciate his focus on that balance between short-term and long-term vision. That's something we could all stand to think more about.
I think it's clear that Tyler is someone who is driven to make a positive impact, not just in his own life, but in the world.
And in part 3, we're going to see how that drive plays out. We'll unpack his thoughts on the future, technology, and some of the big challenges facing our world today.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the fascinating world of Tyler's thoughts.
We've really covered a lot of ground, haven't we? Exploring his passions, his values, his perspective on leadership and personal growth.
But we're not done yet. There's still so much to unpack, especially when it comes to his ideas about business technology and the forces that are shaping our world.
One thing that really jumped out at me was his focus on the future of work and education. He predicts that universities will go the way of the dinosaur.
Wow. It's a bold statement. But given how quickly technology is advancing, it's not entirely surprising. The skills needed in today's economy are changing so rapidly, traditional education systems are struggling to keep up.
He envisions a future where, instead of those big traditional universities, we have these more agile, adaptable forms of learning, maybe with more emphasis on practical skills, entrepreneurship, things like that.
It definitely fits with his emphasis on, lifelong learning, always adapting and evolving your skills to stay ahead of the curve.
He's also concerned about this growing talent gap when it comes to things like, computer programming and data science. He thinks we need some really innovative approaches to education and workforce development.
That's a huge challenge. And with AI and automation rapidly transforming the workplace, it's only going to get more difficult.
It's a good reminder that we need to be proactive, about preparing ourselves and future generations for the jobs that don't even exist yet. Investing in STEM education, fostering creativity, and really embracing this mindset of lifelong learning.
Now, Tyler also shares some really interesting thoughts on the role of technology in society. He predicts that tribes need to be formed to connect like-minded people. He seems to be advocating for more real-world relationships in our increasingly digital world.
Yeah, it's like he recognizes that technology can have downsides, It can lead to isolation, a decline in genuine human connection.
He's not anti-technology, but he's calling for balance. He wants us to find ways to use technology to actually enhance our connections, not replace them.
He talks about this blend of online and offline interaction, which makes sense, doesn't it? It's about finding the right mix.
Another theme that really comes through is this idea of purpose-driven organizations. He's critical of companies that just chase profits, without actually creating value for their users. He wants to see a more humanistic approach to business.
It makes me think back to his thoughts on the hedgehog concept, right? aligning passion, talent, and economic viability.
It seems like he really believes that businesses perform best when they empower their employees, get rid of all the unnecessary bureaucracy and focus on delivering products and services that benefit their customers.
He's saying put people first, your employees and your customers, and ultimately that leads to a more successful and sustainable business.
Now, Tyler also offers some very practical advice for leaders. He talks about how important it is to make good decisions and delegate effectively.
And he reminds us that just working hard isn't enough. You have to be working on the right things.
It's about working smarter, not just harder, making sure your efforts are aligned with your goals.
He warns against confusing, activity with results. Businesses should reward outcomes, not just effort.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He even gives us a little framework for, tracking progress after meetings. Figure out the who, what, and when for every decision.
It's about accountability, right? Making sure things actually get done, turning ideas into reality.
So, as we come to the end of our deep dive into Tyler's mind, it's clear that he's someone who really thinks deeply about the world.
He's definitely a visionary, a leader, someone who is passionate about making a positive difference.
And his reflections offer so many insights into leadership, personal growth, the future of work, this idea of finding meaning and purpose in our rapidly changing world.
Yeah, it's been really inspiring. What are your biggest takeaways? What resonated with you?
I think for me, it's his belief in human potential and his commitment to, creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
He really encourages us to think about our own passions and values, doesn't he?
And that's what this deep dive is all about, right? The power of self-reflection, taking the time to really examine our thoughts, our values, our motivations.
It's how we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and figure out what truly matters.
And from there, we can make choices that are aligned with our authentic selves, build meaningful relationships, and create a life that is both fulfilling and impactful.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into Tyler's mind.
And until next time,
Yeah.
keep exploring, keep learning, and keep striving to make a difference.